Ambazonia Defense Forces, the vanguards of the Ambazonia War of Independence.
For 50 years, these two mass murderers used violence and deception to keep Ambazonia hostage. Most Ambazonian patriots succumbed and enabled the dismantling of our political institutions. Then came the commander-in-chief, the leader of the never-again generation, and prescribed iron for iron, block by block, and fire for fire. Today, 7 years after Ambazonia has emerged, it has an army, run its own schools, let's pay our liberation tax to raise a budget to take our struggle to the next level.
Ambazonia Defense Forces, the vanguards of the Ambazonia War of Independence.
My fellow Ambazonians, this is Dr. Cho Ayaba. Good morning to everyone. I scheduled a public outing yesterday to speak to you people on the issue of the Supreme General of the ADF, General EFANG. But there were still some lingering questions which I had to answer yesterday before making a public statement. I think that is clarified now. General EFANG is one of the finest nationalists that Ambazonia will ever have. It's the guy that has given us a great sense of hope through his organization, his great sense of nationalism, colorful. He is the one who inspired all barracks in Ambazonia to arm. He is the one who saw arming ourselves as very important in our liberation and our protection. And that inspired other barracks to follow. He was the source of a lot of things. 1st of October, big celebrations that inspired our people, the foundation of our community schools, different policies like taxation. And they call him a Zemo. I'm not quite sure what the soldiers mean by this, but he's a wonderful gentleman. And I just wanted to take a few moments to make some public clarification so that I know that a lot of you have a lot of questions. How could it happen? And why it happened? I know some are extremely very happy, but this is war. And anything can happen. We are operating within a very difficult space. And we have mastered our terrain. We have been able to build alert systems, defenses that prevent things like this from happening. General EFANG has been attacked by the enemy more than 100 times. And he has been able to survive all of those attacks. As a leader, I knew that one day they will get lucky. They just need one lock. And they had their lock the other day. So my office was notified by the commander of Momo that his location had been surrounded. You may ask, how could they even gain access to? We control a vast zone. And so we don't have like a up station where it's like a fortress where the enemy has barricaded themselves inside and then they move in armor cars, helicopters, and maybe a plethora of forces. We don't operate that way. So if you see the enemy has decided to retreat like in Mezam, up station is because they find it like a fortress, difficult to penetrate. So, and when they move into the city, they move with armor cars, they had different intelligence networks to protect their own leaders. We don't have fortresses. We operate from inside. We don't have zones to retreat to like outside, like other liberation struggles. But we've built a very strong network of defenses and intelligence outposts to be able to monitor enemy movements and take quick actions just in case. The enemy knows where our commanders are. The problem has been to penetrate those places. That's why when we've always talked about blacklegs and spies, it's a serious issue. So I was notified that the Supreme General's location had been surrounded. And the gunfire that was emanating from there was kind of the loudest that our forces have ever gotten. So we tried to move forces to open a corridor. It was not easy to even approach. The forces that were with him, that provide a kind of security, I don't want to go into details, had been bypassed because the enemy was able to approach his location with the help of the fund or chief of EY. And we have another information that the son was part of the military. I've spoken to this particular chief. He's been a pro-Ambazonian chief. But we suspect that because of the pressure of the traitors and collaborators who are outside, they mobilize money to manipulate him. And because we were close with him, he basically was part and parcel of the community that our forces were in. And he was able to move with the enemy forces, bypassing the network of checkpoints that we had put around the Supreme General. And they surprised the Supreme right in the house, in the room. And they themselves were really scared. This briefing I'm giving you, I got it directly from the Supreme. So one of them picked up a shoe and tried to drop on him to find out if he was sleeping, because it was already morning. And he immediately went for his rifle and fought out from the room. And when he entered the living room, he used the grenade to be able to disperse the enemy, and then got out of the entire space. About an hour later, I got notified that they had rang his phone, and it was answered by an element of the B. By then, we already knew that he had been killed. About 30 minutes later, another call came in that a helicopter was coming in. So at that moment also, I have notified the executive, I notified the relevant stakeholders of the AGOVC that expect that the Supreme General has been killed. The bodyguards, we could not get anybody. Later on, we got a guard who said the Supreme fought his way out. So there was a bit of hope, but there was no contact. Almost 3 hours later, we got one of the soldiers who was with him, was also wounded. And so he said he cannot confirm if the Supreme escaped that attack, but there is hope because he fought himself out of that space. 5 hours later, we now got notification that he is somewhere. There was still no contact. We sent a contingent of forces and they were able to confirm. And then we spoke to him on phone, and then later I spoke to him on video. He was wounded, and I think in the past days I have briefed the commanders, I've briefed the executive, I've briefed the base of the AGOVC. He was really wounded, but was okay. So we began treatment and we realized we needed specialist treatment. We had to move him from Momo to Mezam, into Mezam, where we got preliminary treatment and moved him into a secure location. And there we got some treatment also, and he was okay. So it was not like his life was threatened, but the wounds were not really looking good. And if not tender, could lead to infection and even death. A few days ago, we moved him again. We needed to take him back into a specialist place. He needed blood, he needed operation. All those things were done. Somehow the enemy got information. So as we were taking him into the hospital again for treatment, the enemy attacked. We moved him up into a particular area and we notified forces in Bui, notified forces in Mezam. You know, I notify also forces in Boyo. They all worked together, and the forces nearby, they got the Supreme into a barrack. The next morning, the day he was kidnapped by the enemy, the forces moved him back into the hospital. I just got information that the hospital staffs have been arrested. So I first thought they were arrested by the enemy forces. Then I was notified they were arrested by Ambazonian forces, making sure the Supreme was treated. So they treated him and they were supposed to move him into a particular area before we could get him out of the hospital. The enemy swam in. It's very difficult to allow the enemy to get to the level they got with the Supreme, but it's the nature of the liberation struggle. But I just want to assure each and every one of you that in the mechanics of leadership, there are many things I will not go into. In the mechanics of leadership, you factor these scenarios every day. Every day. I called a meeting, I think 2 weeks ago. I asked the defense to get into a meeting with me to look at the vulnerabilities around the Supreme, other generals, top generals. And that is I have argued this with you people many times, why we need to mobilize resources, control states. I talked to you about the necessity to establish hospitals in safe states where you can get forces treated when they are wounded. In war, forces are treated by sometimes institutions that are established to cater for forces for the wounded in times of war. In the Ambazonian situation, you realize it was the Medecins Sans Frontières that was kicked out because the enemy knows we will have wounded. They, as an established functional state, have military hospitals that are in safe zones. They can treat their wounded. They can evacuate their wounded also into their own territory. So these are the things that we lack, and I have made the argument we must move to the level where we control states within which we can train, we can operate hospitals, and we can do a lot of things without the threat from the enemy, because we don't have a fallback like the Rwandans had in Uganda or the Ugandans had in Tanzania. We don't have that kind of a fallback. We operate from inside. So we still have these vulnerabilities, and we must overcome them. We have in the past days been able to make an assessment of our forces, and I am able to inform you that the strength of our forces is not weakened. They have lost their leader, their symbol, their father, but we know he's in the hands of the enemy. We have notified the international community. We have been able to, you've watched some videos, I haven't watched most of those things, but he's in the hands of the enemy. What I want to tell Ambazonians is that the resistance will intensify. We authorized forces the other night to take certain actions. You must have heard in Bamenda, actions were launched against enemy targets. We must have killed more than 7 enemy forces in an IED attack on the armor cars. They ordered the chief of EY to surrender himself to the forces. He has surrendered himself to the enemy forces. We know he is up stationed in Bamenda. We will track him. The village of EY will not exist on the map of Ambazonia. I will not talk about many other actions that we will take, but we will take action. And we will continue to do the things that we have been doing. The Supreme General will remain the Supreme General. He will not be replaced. Wherever he is, he will remain the Supreme General of the Ambazonian Defense Forces and the inspiration of our nationalism. What I also want to tell you is this. In 2000, I think that was 2011, the leader of the revolutionary movement of Colombia, the FARC, Afonso Cano, he was killed in an airstrike. At that particular moment when he was killed, the Colombian rebels were having negotiations with the Colombian government in Cuba. During one of the sessions, the Colombian team was notified that their leader had been killed. I had a meeting with one of the FARC commanders who was in the jungle for 20 years. She's now a senator in the Colombian parliament. She was part of the negotiation. I asked her, what did you do? How did you feel? And how did you people react? She said to me it was so difficult because their leader was a very charismatic leader, was an emblematic figure. And it was so hard to believe that at the same time when they were having negotiations, the Colombian government bombed their headquarters in the jungle and then sent special forces that killed him. But one thing she said to me was they did not walk out of the discussions. 6 years later, the Colombian government signed a peace agreement with the FARC. I just want to let you know that these things happen in war. There is precedence. In May of, I think 2007, the East Timorese separatist leader, Gusmao was arrested in a tunnel near Dili by Indonesian special forces. In May of 1993, he was tried and sentenced to life imprisonment. He became president of East Timor. His forces had nearly been wiped out. They were pushed into their mountain hideouts. When a new president came into Indonesia, he realized they had no justification for the continuous occupation of East Timor, and that keeping their leader, continuous killing of East Timorese, was not going to make Indonesia more powerful. On the day that he was being moved from prison into house arrest for negotiations with the Indonesian government, a couple of his supporters were singing and praying. He raised his right fist in defiance. We are aware that on August 5th, 1962, Nelson Mandela was captured and he was later tried and sentenced to life imprisonment. He spent 27 years in jail. Like Gusmao of East Timor, he was also moved from jail into a separate location to negotiate the surrender of the enemy. And the enemy surrendered. In 1979, the minority Tutsis in Rwanda, supported by President Museveni of Uganda, formed the Rwandan Patriotic Front political party in exile and the Rwandan Patriotic Army. Fred Ruwagema became the chairman of both arms. In their first attempt to invade Rwanda from Uganda, Fred Ruwagema was killed. Present President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, became the commander of the Rwandan Patriotic Army. He fought hard. He defeated the Habyarimana government, and he has been ruling Rwanda ever since. Ambazonian situation may not be different, but one thing I can tell each and every one of you is that we have risen. And the tenacity of our forces, the bravery of our forces is unrivaled. What we sometimes question is if some of you Ambazonians have that kind of tenacity. The East Timorese fought for 24 years. They never blinked. The Palestinians have been fighting for 75 years. Even though you can look that Gaza has been flattened, you don't see them on the streets blaming Palestinian resistance fighters. Even when Hamas moved into Israel and committed all the kinds of crimes that they did, South Africa is still able to file a case in the ICJ against Israel. The Eritreans fought so hard, lost so many commanders. The main commander of the South Sudanese, John Garang, was killed in a helicopter crash. South Sudan is today independent. For all those who rejoice for the enemy, let this history be a lesson to you. For each and every one of you who thinks, who contemplates that one day status quo ante will be restored, where Cameroon will take over Ambazonia. You are having a nightmare and not a dream. Ambazonia has risen. It will bury Cameroon in the cemetery of occupiers, and we will rise up to take over control of the land that was bestowed to us by our Creator and nature. We will stumble, we will fall, but we will rise. General Ivo was killed. General EFANG took over to build a force that became the pride of the Ambazonian people. General EFANG was kidnapped by Nambere and others, subjected to torture. 60% of our materials were seized. He was later attacked in Bui. More than 30 of our finest men were buried alive. All of our materials were seized. We had less than 10 men in the barrack with 10 rifles. We rebelled and showed you on every October the metal, the kind of people we are. We have lost big generals on the ground. In Lebialem, in Fako, in Bui, in Mezam, we have lost Ambazonian generals. Yet, in the barracks in Ambazonia, other generals are emerging to continue the journey to make sure we are free. And we are free. The mental liberation we have achieved is important for our stability. Our country looks like a space in the 15th century. No roads, no hospitals, no electricity, no water. These things, their absence is not because of the war. Their absence is because of the occupation. Ambazonians have fled Ambazonia for the past 60 years, not because of the war in the past 7 years, because of the occupation. Economic refugees, educational refugees, political refugees, security refugees. The occupation is the curse that has been responsible for the pain and suffering. The resistance is the antidote. One of my top advisors wrote yesterday, and this is what I want to leave with you today. We have to be prepared to take the roads we have never taken before. We have to be prepared for the unexpected, the impossible, and the unimaginable. That is what it takes to move from a state of occupation and total dependency to a state of freedom, independence, and ownership of your destiny. God bless you all, and God protect our forces and the Supreme Leader of the Ambazonian Defense Forces.
Good morning, Pachi. Good morning to everybody. I just wanted to appreciate you, the speech of this morning. You have really said it. You've said it all. You've said it to the best points of it. I wish your brothers and sisters should understand that we are really in it for development and nothing else. But on the other side, I wanted to encourage our brothers and sisters and to those who are in the village equally that they should not panic. Nobody should panic anything here. We should stay focused, be vigilant, and continue with our individual activities while equally preparing for our forthcoming contributions for this year. I want to say this: people should not panic. When I say people should not panic, it's because he who wants to harm somebody, he who wants to destroy somebody, will not come and stand in the public and be announcing that I'm going to do this, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to do so. We should understand that these people, they have received a shock which is to them unbearable, but they must only bear it. And they want to do everything to frighten people. That's just simply what they are doing, just to threaten and frighten people like that. We should just be tactical, we should just be vigilant and wise. And we need to cooperate. Those who are in the village, please, I am pleading. No information is neglected. No information is neglected. When you have any information, you should table it to the appropriate quarters competent to solve it or to exploit the information. Please, we need people who can cooperate and give reliable information so that the reliable headquarters in which are responsible can work on them. Please, like I said, please, we should not panic. You know, it is fear that brings death. It is fear that brings death. The more we are afraid, the more we are equally pushed into traps of the enemy. So we should remain focused. We should remain focused, please. There's nothing to fear about. All is well, and you shall be well more than that. Thank you very much for understanding and better cooperation. God bless us all.
Fellow Amazonians, we have good morning once more. Day today, number 21 day inside January 2024. I don't forget announce now. This big attack where it happened for Mezam, where the Mezam Unity Warriors they carry out when I watch for this video. That the video this for the attack where it happened last night for Mezam, where the Mezam Unity Warriors they carry out. Fellow Amazonians, for money time for during our situation analysis for the war of Mezam, we announced this big Dongame where it happened on La Popular Cameroon. Now so we feel confirm say more than 7 La Popular Cameroon forces they died for this attack. More than 7 La Popular Cameroon invading forces they died for this attack, championed by the Mezam Unity Warriors. Make una know say Mezam don unite all forces for Mezam. They dey under the banner of Mezam Unity Warriors. So our forces for Mezam, congratulations for una for doing this big Dongame war way it happened for La Popular Cameroon. Before we wan continue for analyze the video, make I leave una make una watch the video, then we analyze. Una watch the video.
Good morning. Yeah, today na 21st January 2024. Yeah, so the Mezam Unity Warrior they work yesterday under the leadership of the ADF. So now we see the now here we knock the motor. Now here we knock the motor for past 8 for night. Now see all engine oil. Now the party get released. Don't can carry and go. So now the road is we will knock them the night.
Yes, Ambazonians, we have not watched that video today where our forces they tactically blow off La Republic du Cameroon armor car as we be reporting for early morning time for we tell una say this La Republic du Cameroon armor car, La Republic du Cameroon they be go for go attend die place for take chop for chop, and our forces they ambush them for their place. That way the one wrong go down for carry that body they run. Their motor fall on top another explosion where our forces they plant them. We will not see the pictures for Amber News line. We will not see the way we completely blow them off. So you will never watch the video. You will never see what will happen. Go down for Amber News line page for Facebook. You go click on like and follow. You go click on like and follow or subscribe for see which way it get for day. And each time when we post new video like this one, we will see exactly why the liberation war the water. This one it comes from the Mezam Unity Warriors. The Mezam Unity Warriors. Where we don't hear our hero, our fighter, one of the best fighters the world who get inside Ambazonia. He don't report for day. We don't hear for you one more. We look at me, Amber News line, and the talker, the Mezam Unity Warrior, that they carry out this heavy attack on La Republic du Cameroon. And we call upon all the Ambazonian forces all over from northern to southern for engage for explosive, for engage for popcorn, for engage for buy material, for popcorn, because now this popcorn it will win this war for the shortest time. Maybe we don't say at this time where 11 February become, we need a lot of popcorn there. When I see for this video, when I see the way the popcorn completely damage the whole road. Now why don't say reconstruction don't be banned for Amazonia? Because when they fix road, so it will be hard for plant popcorn. When they fix road, it will be hard for plant our explosive or popcorn. So when they now they spoiler, they already fix. So anyone when they live on the fix road for the area, now black like anyone they live on the fix road for the area with the Amazonia force. They say you need to work for the liberation fight. We are therefore spoil road them in order for say they will plant popcorn them and not the fix road instead. Spoil road. We are received for Bafu, we get a spoil road, we plant popcorn, we blow them off the fight. And now we are not see that we don't blow them off for here again. We are share this video or audio, make it go viral. We are never see the video, we are go for Amber News page, we are go watch the video for day. Now we on Amber News we don't bring with this breaking Uganda news way, you don't come out inside the Mezam where our forces are completely blow off La Republic du Cameroon Amoka. Unfortunately for Ambazonians, they don't share this kind news. They are going to share the extra news the way they did against the Ambazonian liberation war. This kind news they don't share that make it go viral. No, they don't share that. They are actually going to share that which way it did against the Ambazonian liberation war. They are going to share that say La Republic of Kiso commander or so fighter. La Republic of Kiso this. Now one they will share that. But they will share this one also for say how we don't humiliate La Republic. Humiliate the highways and the guy humiliate their national team. No, they know they share the one. No, wait, when La Republic of Kiso kill end of our brother, that one they will not go share that. It be very shameful. But when all these things that happen, we still get our Ambazonian that hard people the way they stand with the struggle, they stand we will continue for share any news where we post that way, it is hinder, where it bring down La Republic, where it cause harm on La Republic, they will share them. So the share this video or audio, make it go viral now. Some of you now will never see the video, when I go for other this line now, the page, when I go watch the video for them, when I share the video, when I share them.
Ambazonia Defense Forces, the vanguards of the Ambazonia War of Independence.
For 50 years, these two mass murderers used violence and deception to keep Ambazonia hostage. Most Ambazonian patriots succumbed and enabled the dismantling of our political institutions. Then came the commander-in-chief, the leader of the never-again generation, and prescribed iron for iron, block by block, and fire for fire. Today, 7 years after Ambazonia has emerged, it has an army, run its own schools, let's pay our liberation tax to raise a budget to take our struggle to the next level.
Ambazonia Defense Forces, the vanguards of the Ambazonia War of Independence.